episode of Cars of the Macabre.
An online source said that it was when she was 11. Wuornos began trading sexual favours for money, beer and cigarettes, resulting in the derogatory nickname Cigarette Pig. In one infamous episode during the early 1980s, Aileen, reportedly wearing nothing but a bikini, stumbled into a convenience store while drunk and attempted to rob the place at gunpoint. So from late 1989 through late 1990, the bodies of 7 middle-aged white men were discovered in central Florida. The assailant had robbed all the victims before shooting them to death and then stealing their cars.
Profanity is guaranteed. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back to Cars of the Macabre with me, Ali, and you, Helen.
That was very professional of you.
Thank you. It's the hair and the glasses that are doing it.
Love that. Maybe that's what I should have done at the beginning of today, and then I might have been able to talk when we were doing our other episodes.
No, you're fine. I think it's expected of us now, really.
Yeah, to be honest, I think you're probably right.
Yeah. Oh, it's jumping about. Right, so the case that I'm doing today, it's a long one. It is going to be a two-parter because we all know that I struggled to just keep it to one part.
Yeah.
But there is a lot that's involved with this, so it does warrant being multiple parts. Mm-hmm. So today I'm going to tell you about Aileen Wuornos, America's first known female serial killer.
I'm intrigued because I know a few things about her, but not a lot about her.
Yeah, so I was watching a documentary by a British director called Nick Broomfield. It was the most recent one he'd done, which was in like 2003. But prior to that, sort of 10 years before, he'd done one that sort of as a beginning to all of this.
Right, okay.
I say a beginning, it's after she was arrested and everything like that. So that kind of really got me into it because I didn't realise some of it. And you're going to feel a little bit of sympathy for the child Aileen.
Right.
And there's some few twists and turns. So I'm going to crack on because there is a hell of a lot to get through.
Okie dokie.
So Aileen Carol Wuornos was born Aileen Carol Pittman on February 29th, 1956 in Rochester, Michigan. So she was a leap year baby. Her mother, Diane Wuornos, was just 14 years old when she married Leo Dale Pittman, who was 18 at the time. The two tied the knot on the 3rd of June 1954 in what would prove to be a short and turbulent union. Less than a year later, Diane gave birth to Eileen's older brother Keith on the 14th of March 1955. Just 2 months before Aileen was born, Diane filed for divorce. And so at the age of 16, she was a single mother.
Gosh.
Aileen would never meet her father. Leo's criminal behaviour escalated, and by 1967 he was serving a life sentence for the kidnapping and rape of a 7-year-old girl.
Oh my God.
And then he would eventually die by suicide in prison in 1969.
Wow.
By January 1960, when Aileen was not yet 4 years old, her mother abandoned both of her children, leaving them behind in Troy, Michigan, with their maternal grandparents Laurie and Britta Wuornos. That March, so the 18th of March 1960, the grandparents formally adopted both Aileen and Keith, and they raised them alongside their own children, so Eileen's aunt and uncle by blood, siblings by law.
It's already a complicated story, isn't it? Blimey.
Childhood friends said that Wuornos' grandfather beat her and her grandmother was an alcoholic. Around the age of 10, Wuornos learned that her parents were actually her biological grandparents, so I don't know what she kind of thought before, because obviously she was with her mum until up to nearly 4 years old, so I'm not quite sure. And with regards to Keith obviously being a little bit older, I don't know whether he... Yeah. But what's interesting is that the media sort of started to make some comparisons between Wuornos and Ted Bundy, because Ted Bundy was raised believing that his grandparents were also his parents. For quite a number of years. So this knowledge added more tension to an unhappy household. Laurie, Eileen's grandfather, was a harsh disciplinarian and once reportedly had Aileen watch him drown a kitten.
Oh my God.
Yeah. In the documentary, one of the documentaries that I watched, a school friend said that I think they played hooky So they were truant from school one day, and they were walking back, and sort of Laurie realised that they'd been playing truant, and then they used to have like a screen door, like for their front door, and the friend watched Aileen as she was bent over a chair and then repeatedly hit with a belt.
Oh my gosh.
And he knew that the school friend was watching. So, yeah. Wuornos later stated that she was physically and sexually abused by her grandfather and also has sexual relations with her brother during childhood, which is quite bizarre because, again, in the documentary, there's all of these revelations, but then she turned around and was like, no, people lied about my family. My father, he was so straight, so clean, so smart, so decent. It's the same as her mum. Like if you cussed, she'd be shoving a bar of soap down your like in your mouth to wash it clean. So
they're two very, very conflicting.
Yeah. So you had school friends
Possibilities.
that have witnessed, some brutality. You had Aileen herself saying that she suffered at the hands of her grandfather, and her mum being an alcoholic and everything like that. And then in the next breath, she's saying, no, they were stand-up citizens.
Yeah, I suppose you can't really trust what she says.
But then as we go along, you might sort of start to see how her mind might be slightly addled.
Yeah, it sounds like she might have some sort of disassociation, which I could understand because she's had a horrific time already. So
Around the age of, I've seen two sources. The documentary said it was at 9 years old. And an online source said it was when she was 11. Wuornos began trading sexual favours for money, beer and cigarettes, resulting in the derogatory nickname Cigarette Pig.
Oh, God.
But can you imagine at 9 years old? Oh, well, 9 or 11, either age is horrific, but doing that...
That's awful.
I feel like this is behaviour perhaps that she wouldn't have just plucked out of thin air.
No.
It's been influenced somehow.
Yeah.
And whether that's through the abuse that she received or not, or, just how people perhaps were treating her.
Yeah.
Her sex work further isolated Wuornos from her peers, and at 14 she had her only child. Yeah. She was taken to a house for unwed mothers, or home for unwed mothers, gave birth. Neighbours claimed that the father was an older adult friend of Wuornos' grandfather, and there's also speculation it was the local paedophile.
Ew.
Which I think he was the local paedophile, but he still had quite a lot of community involvement.
Well, I mean, look at the history of people like Jimmy Savile.
Well,
You know, they had blame the local pedo. It's an obvious one, yeah. Yeah, but look, and it's coming out time after time that these people with opportunities and power.
But if she's also, if she's getting things from it like money, food, cigarettes and things like that, then again, it's not completely out of the realms of possibility that she willingly went into that to get something out of it, and unfortunately then through whatever circumstances has ended up pregnant.
Yeah.
So the child was given up for adoption very soon after being born. And soon after that, her grandmother Britta, who had struggled with alcoholism, died from cirrhosis of the liver on the 7th of July 1971. At this point, Laurie refused to care for his granddaughter any longer and kicked her out. I've read where both her and her brother, he threatened them that he would kill them if they didn't leave.
Oh, God.
She began either living in the woods or sleeping in abandoned cars, and then hitchhiking around the country, often under assumed names. And there's quite a poignant moment in the documentary where she says, Dad said I caused Mum's death because of my behaviour, so that's why I was thrown out. On the 27th of May, 1974, at the age of 18, Wuornos was arrested in Jefferson County, Colorado for driving under the influence, disorderly conduct and firing a .22 caliber pistol from a moving vehicle. She was then later charged with failure to appear in court, obviously. March of 1976, Laurie died by suicide according to the book Lethal Intent, which was written by Sue Russell, and Aileen didn't attend the funeral. By that time, she'd been hitchhiking across the country, continuing to engage in sex work as well. After losing her brother Keith to cancer when he was just 21 years old, Aileen Wuornos was once again untethered and adrift. She left Michigan behind and headed south to Florida, where she survived the only way she knew how, which was through sex work, hustling along highways and rest stops, trying to scrape together enough for food, motels and cigarettes. Not long after her arrival, however, Aileen crossed paths with an unlikely partner. His name was Louis Gratz-Fell and was a well-to-do yachtsman in his 70s, so nearly 5 decades her senior. Despite the age gap and wildly different backgrounds, they married in May of 1976 when Aileen was just 20 years old. But the marriage collapsed pretty much instantly. Within weeks, Fell sought an annulment, claiming Aileen was violent and out of control. According to his statement, she beat him with his own cane during a heated outburst, and Aileen, for her part, insisted it was he who had attacked her. The relationship, if it can be called that, officially ended on the 19th of July 1976, just 2 months after it began.
Wow. It's incredible what she's been through, and she's just only 20 at this point.
Yeah. It's insane because, you know, I consider that I've gone through quite a lot, but then I still think it's nowhere near. Well, no, it isn't. It's completely different circumstances and different situations and things like that, but it's just crazy that so much bad stuff can happen to one person. So you can kind of see where any anger and rage and hatred can come from.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, she wasn't treated well as a child by those who were supposed to be looking after her, by those considered her peers, anything like that. So from that point on, Aileen's life continued to spiral. By 1991, her criminal record was lengthy and chaotic, peppered with felonies and misdemeanours. So there was forgery, assault, armed robbery, weapons violations, frequent arrests tied to sex work, and law enforcement often described her as volatile, with reports frequently noting her poor attitude during booking. And so she never hid her age. It was radiating from her, essentially. In one infamous episode during the early 1980s, Aileen, reportedly wearing nothing but a bikini, stumbled into a convenience store while drunk and attempted to rob the place at gunpoint. She was caught and served time for armed robbery. This incident was detailed in Peter Vronsky's Female Serial Killers, which is a book, which I might read. Over the years, her offences piled up. She was writing bad cheques, resisting arrest, theft, DUI charges, and a lot of the crimes were committed under aliases. She kind of had a habit of changing names basically as often as she was changing towns, really. Then in June of 1986, everything changed. At this point, she was going by the name Lee, and she walked into a Daytona Beach gay bar and met 24-year-old Tyria Moore. Tyria was quiet, somewhat shy, and worked as a hotel maid. Aileen, fiery and desperate for connection, was instantly drawn to her. The two began what would become a tumultuous 4.5-year romantic relationship, living together almost immediately. You can see from watching the documentaries, it's obviously after Aileen's been arrested, and the controversy that goes with it, with the people who are involved with her personally. But you can see just how much sort of Aileen, you can see how much she loved and continued to love Tyria despite being hurt by her, which obviously I'll explain later on. Their bond was intense, it was passionate and at times very toxic. Tyria found work cleaning motels and houses, but Aileen didn't like it when she interacted with other people. Her jealousy and possessiveness flared quickly, and Aileen continued to engage in sex work to keep them afloat, mostly along Florida's dusty highway corridors. They bounced between cheap motels, trailer parks and short-term apartments around Daytona and elsewhere in Florida. Sometimes broke, sometimes fighting, but always together. From the outside, it may have looked like Aileen had finally found something close to stability, which, you know, you can imagine she'd been searching for quite some time.
Yeah.
She and Tyria were inseparable. They had a roof over their heads most nights. They shared meals, cigarettes, motel beds, and most importantly for Aileen, they had each other. So she's been craving a genuine connection with someone, and she thinks she's found it in this lady, which kind of then is, when I explain what happened later on, is quite heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So beneath the surface, their relationship was already buckling under the pressure of poverty, secrecy, and Eileen's deepening paranoia. While Tyria picked up work as a housekeeper and hotel maid, Aileen stayed on the road. She'd walk the shoulders of Florida's rural highways, flagging down Johns, doing what she had always done to survive. But she wasn't just feeding herself at this point. She was providing for Tyria, and in Eileen's mind, that made all the difference. So she took immense pride in being the provider, even it may have cost her safety, her dignity, and little by little her grip on reality.
Yeah.
The days were filled with mounting tension, frequent arguments, accusations of cheating, emotional blow-ups, long silences. Aileen didn't trust easily and was terrified of losing Tyria. So you've got the two ends of the spectrum there. You've got like all the jealousy and everything, but you've got so much love that you can't, you know, even when things were bad, you can't let go of that because you think you found your safe place.
Yeah.
Police records and later interviews would paint a picture of a woman who felt trapped in an unrelenting cycle, desperate to be loved yet terrified of abandonment. Aileen clung to Tyria fiercely, sometimes aggressively, with a loyalty that bordered on obsession. And the more she clung, the more Tyria withdrew emotionally, unsure how to handle the woman she had once fallen in love with. The couple was constantly on the move, evicted from motels, skipping out on rent, occasionally sleeping in the woods when money dried up. Aileen would pawn stolen items to get quick cash, often turning over the last of her earnings just to keep a roof over their heads and beer in the fridge. Tyria never participated in any of the sex work, but she obviously knew where the money was coming from. She also knew Aileen had a temper, quick to ignite, especially when drunk or feeling cornered. Friends and neighbours would later describe Aileen as unstable, combative,
Combative?
yeah, that one, and prone to explosive mood swings. And yet there was also a side of her that could be childlike, even gentle, especially with Tyria. She wrote her notes, left small gifts, talked about building a life together. But dreams like that do cost money. And in Eileen's world, there was very few options. She was limited as how she could achieve those. By 1989, something inside her had begun to change. Years of abuse, rejection, homelessness and humiliation had eroded what little sense of safety she had left. Her rage was no longer just directed at individuals, it was taking aim at the world. Aileen began to speak in increasingly paranoid tones, convinced that people were out to get her. She hated her clients, often describing them as disgusting, abusive and sometimes violent. Whether all of that was true or not, Aileen believed it. And in the documentary, sort of staying on the lines of Tyria, Aileen does then go to say that, like, Tyria would spend all the money. You know, she wasn't as quite saintly as originally thought.
Right, okay.
So from late 1989 through late 1990, the bodies of 7 middle-aged white men were discovered in central Florida. The assailant had robbed all the victims before shooting them to death and then stealing their cars. So now I'm going to go on to talk about the victims. The first victim was Richard Mallory. He was killed in 1989 and was a 51-year-old repair shop owner who picked up a sex worker along Interstate 75 in Florida to engage in sex for pay. He was known to frequently hire sex workers. He was last seen on November 30th, 1989, and on December 13th, 1989, Mallory's body was found at an illegal dumping site in the woods by a Volusia County deputy several miles away from his abandoned car. Mallory had been shot multiple times in the chest, and according to Tyria Moore's testimony, the next day Wuornos told Moore she had killed the man.
Wow.
Together, Wuornos and Tyria Moore sold stolen items at Florida pawn shops, and during the murder investigations, Volusia County Police discovered items belonging to Richard Mallory at a local pawn shop, with the receipt showing Wuornos' thumbprint. Police then traced other stolen items from Mallory to Wuornos. A camera from Mallory's car was found inside a rented warehouse unit, which was opened with a key taken from Wuornos. Wuornos had rented the unit under an alias, and police traced other items from Mallory's car to people or pawn shops Wuornos had contacted. The second victim was David Spears. The nude body of David Spears, a 43-year-old construction worker, was found on the 1st of June 1990 in Citrus County. He'd been shot 6 times in the torso. Then there's Charles Cascadden. So a few days after Spears' body was discovered, on the 6th of June, the body of Charles Cascadden, aged 40, was discovered in Pasco County. He was reported missing on 31st of May 1990, and the part-time rodeo worker had been shot 9 times in the chest and stomach.
Gosh.
Then there's Troy Barres. Marion County law enforcement found the body of Troy, a 50-year-old salesman, on the 4th of August 1990, less than a week after he was reported missing. Though the body was fairly decomposed, the medical examiner was able to determine that the cause of death was 2 gunshots to the torso. Next is Charles Dick Humphreys. He was a retired Air Force major, police chief, and Florida child abuse investigator. Wow. Dick Humphreys was found dead in Marion County on September 12th, 1990. The body was fully clothed and had suffered multiple gunshots to the head and torso. Humphreys' car was later found in Suwannee County. Then there's Peter Sims. He was a 65-year-old missionary, and he'd left Central Florida and headed for New Jersey in the June of 1990. His car was found in Orange Springs on the 4th of July 1990. Though Sims' body has never been found, witnesses described 2 women near the car in Orange Springs. So, according to the documentary, they'd obviously taken his car and they drove it sort of into the woods, essentially crashing it somewhat, and there was a house there with people living in it, and they saw them get out of the car, and supposedly Tyria was driving.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
The game is afoot. And then finally, Walter Antonio. The partially disrobed body of Walter Antonio, 62, was found on November 19th, 1990, in a remote part of Dixie County. He had been shot 4 times in the back and head. Antonio's car was found 5 days later in Brevard County. Throughout this time, Wuornos often returned home with new possessions to pawn and cars that she had borrowed.
Right.
She used a variety of aliases when she pawned items belonging to her victims, which made tracking her a little bit more difficult. But in the July of 1990, authorities examined the vehicle of Peter Sims, and the witnesses described seeing Wuornos and Moore leave the car, and a print from the door handle was a match for Wuornos. And it was during all of these that, even before sort of they knew who Aileen was, contrary to what she says, she was dubbed the Damsel of Death.
Oh. Okay.
Which I didn't know. I didn't know she had a nickname.
No, I didn't know that.
By 1990, Tyria Moore had become suspicious, if not fully aware of Wuornos' activities. I think she knew exactly what was going on.
I would be inclined to agree.
Yeah.
How can you not?
Well, exactly. If she's, been sighted in a car that belongs to a victim, body found or not.
Yeah.
She's pawning items. She knows money's coming from somewhere.
And they supposedly spend a lot of time together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It feels like it's very much that bond. Call it a bond, but they would have told each other pretty much everything.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't think Aileen would have been one to hide things from her.
No.
So Moore did move in with her family in Pennsylvania in 1990. After months of investigating a string of murders across Central Florida, law enforcement finally closed in on their primary suspect, Aileen Wuornos. She'd been tracked to Port Orange, a small town just south of Daytona Beach. When the local authorities were ready to make the arrest, they were ordered to stand down. the task force had a bigger plan. They wanted to see if Aileen would reach out to Tyria more, as they thought that she was a suspect as well, Tyria.
Right, okay.
So the composite sketches were made of two people. Again, so you can't tell me she didn't have any involvement if people have witnessed her. They made it, you know. The next day, on January the 9th, 1991, Aileen was found at the Last Resort Bar, which was a biker dive where she was a regular. Undercover officers moved in and arrested her under the pretense of outstanding warrants for minor offences. They never mentioned the murders at this point, and they certainly didn't tip off the media. The arrest was deliberately quiet. Just 24 hours later, detectives located Tyria Moore at her sister's home in Pittston, Pennsylvania. It was there that Moore finally broke her silence. She told investigators that Aileen had confessed to killing Richard Mallory, the first victim, and had done so on the very day it happened. But then there's conflicting evidence, statements that said it was the day after.
Right, okay.
But Moore also admitted she had avoided talking to Aileen about any other suspicious incidents, saying she was terrified of what she might hear or what Aileen might do. I call bull poop.
Yeah.
Detectives offered Moore a deal, helped them get a confession, and she would avoid being prosecuted as an accomplice.
Okay.
Over the next few days, the two women spoke repeatedly by phone. All the calls were recorded, and Tyria, emotionally fragile and clearly rattled, begged Aileen to come clean, pleading with her to take the blame so Tyria wouldn't go down with her. And I've heard the phone calls because you can hear them on the documentary, and you know she's saying, "I don't know if I can go on." So she's real kind of getting in there to, I don't know, toy with Eileen's, what's the word, consciousness?
Yeah.
Conscience, not consciousness.
It made sense to me.
Conscience, and you know her love for her. At first, Aileen was quite guarded, carefully skirting around the direct admissions, but the weight of Tyria's voice, desperate crying, pleading, wore her down. And on the 16th of January 1991, Aileen Wuornos confessed to 6 of the 7 murders. So in the phone call, you can hear, you know, after Tyria is sort of begging with her, you can hear Aileen sort of, she goes quiet and she like lowers her voice, and she's like, "If I have to confess, I will." So, yeah. She claims that each one was self-defence and that she'd been attacked or threatened, and that Tyria had nothing to do with any of it. So legally, the stakes were absolutely enormous. Under Florida law, certain types of killings qualify as capital murder. So they're the kind that can send a person straight to death row.
Right.
And they include murders committed during robberies, kidnappings, sexual assaults, or those involving multiple victims. So Eileen's case met the criteria. She was officially charged with the first-degree murder of Richard Mallory, armed robbery with a deadly weapon, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Prosecutors argued that Mallory's murder had taken place during a robbery, making her eligible for the death penalty. And while the media frenzy had only just begun, the legal process was already in motion. So of the 7 known killings, only the Mallory case would go to trial.
How?
I'll explain why.
Okay.
Right now. The remaining charges would later end in guilty or no contest pleas.
Right.
So therefore it doesn't have to go through the trial process.
Okay.
Wuornos' capital trial for the murder of Richard Mallory began on the 13th of January 1992. The arrest of a female serial killer, a highway sex worker who claimed she killed in self-defence, was essentially media gold.
Yeah.
The story practically wrote itself. A hitchhiking sex worker with a criminal past, accused of murdering 7 men across Florida. Her appearance, her age, her troubled backstory, basically a perfect storm of tabloid sensationalism and true crime obsession. And I will go as far as saying, you know, when she's riled and her eyes widen, she's a scary lady. Like, she terrifies me.
Yeah, I can well imagine.
You can just see it's like manic, it's fury, you can see hatred.
Yeah.
that I'm not saying, she's outright evil, because I don't think we'll know the full story, whether some of it was self-defense or not. It's difficult for me to believe that every case is going to be self-defense, because, but then having said that, look how unlucky she's been with how she's been treated.
True, yeah.
When she was a lot younger. Mm-hmm. News outlets dubbed her the damsel of death and the highway hooker. Front pages splashed her mugshot, sunken eyes, frizzy blonde hair, the fury in her stare, and she became a public spectacle before the trial even began. And behind the scenes, a second, more insidious narrative was unfolding, one that filmmaker Nick Broomfield would later expose in his documentary, Aileen Wuornos, The Selling of a Serial Killer. Broomfield arrived in Florida to document the case, but what he uncovered was a disturbing web of exploitation surrounding Aileen like vultures circling the carcass. Everyone wanted a piece and a paycheck. So I'm going to briefly touch on a couple of people, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail later on. Arlene Praley was a born-again Christian woman who befriended Aileen in jail and later became her adoptive mother.
Okay.
I think at this point Aileen was like 35, and she was deeply involved in controlling Eileen's access to the press. And it wasn't out of pure compassion. Praley, along with Eileen's defence attorney at the time, Steve Glazier, also known as Dr. Legal,
of course,
had entered into deals to sell Eileen's story rights to the highest bidder. They were negotiating with Hollywood, publishers and the media, all while Aileen awaited trial for her life. In one now infamous moment, Broomfield catches Glazier on camera discussing money and media strategy like a press agent, not a defence lawyer. And in fact, Aileen calls him her agent.
Oh.
And they ended up paying, I think, about $12,500. Originally, they asked for $25,000.
Wow.
Aileen was to get $1,000.
Oh my gosh.
Even law enforcement wasn't immune. Again, I will go into a little bit more about that as well. Officers who worked on the case were also caught attempting to broker deals, offering inside information in exchange for film rights and royalties. Broomfield pointedly asked how could anyone get a fair trial when everyone around them was trying to cash in.
Yeah. God.
So some of the witnesses at the trial were some childhood friends or people who knew Aileen and things like that. And she goes on to say, they're lying. I didn't know them. No one would come near me. So,
God, it's so complicated, isn't it?
Yeah. It's not a straightforward story at all.
No.
Aileen, in the middle of this media storm, often appeared confused, manipulated and deeply unstable. The camera captured her sudden outbursts, paranoid rants and moments of emotional vulnerability. Whether she was mentally fit to stand trial was a real question, and one that got drowned out by the circus outside of the courtroom. The documentary became a damning portrait, not just of Aileen Wuornos, but of everyone surrounding her. Broomfield didn't paint her as a hero or a victim, but he pulled the curtain back on how her life and death were being bought, sold and shaped by greed. And so the name of that documentary was The Selling of a Serial Killer, and it's not a nice watch. Because you can just, the people involved, they just had like dollar signs in their eyes essentially, and you can see that. Again, I'm not backing Aileen and what she did. What she did was wrong. But there are certain elements to it where you do think, Jesus.
Yeah. Wow.
The real tragedy wasn't just in the murders. It was how a deeply disturbed woman, born into trauma and spiralling into violence, became entertainment for the masses long before justice was served. So, she's having to contend with the trial and everything like that, as she so rightly should. But then you've got people just feeding off of her as well in the situation. And these are the people that you must feel so betrayed.
Yeah.
Aileen Wuornos, the legal proceedings took place in Volusia County, Florida, where she was tried only once for the murder of Richard Mallory. Her defence at the initial trial was led by Tricia Jenkins, the Chief Assistant Public Defender of Florida's 5th Judicial Circuit. For the remaining 6 murder charges, Wuornos did not face jury trials. Instead, she entered guilty or no contest pleas, effectively bypassing further courtroom battles. These subsequent pleas were coordinated by her private attorney, Dr. Legal, Steve Glazier, who, might I add, the guy's a fool.
Yeah.
Like, he's got no proper legal smarts or anything like that. You know, I don't know if at the time it was legal to smoke pot, but there's one bit that's filmed where he says it's like a 7-joint ride, a 7-joint journey.
Right.
So he was heavily into pot. He was a musician, and he sings on the show, the documentary. The first documentary I watched, he said that he sung a song to Aileen as well, one called Iron Lady by Pete Ox or something like that.
Right.
Which I think is inspired by Aileen. He's a fool, and it is laughable to watch him because he's got no idea what he's doing.
He sounds like a sociopathic narcissist.
I don't know what he is, but he is just ridiculous.
Wow.
He took over her representation following the conclusion of her first trial. And Judge Uriel Blount actually came out of retirement to specifically try the Wuornos case.
Wow.
The prosecution's case against Aileen Wuornos hinged primarily on a videotaped confession she gave during police interrogation. In it, Wuornos recounted the killing of Richard Mallory, in her own words, though her version of events would shift several times over the course of the investigation. To strengthen their case, prosecutors invoked Florida's Williams Rule, a legal provision that allows the introduction of evidence from unrelated crimes if it helps establish motive, which is motive, intent, knowledge, a common pattern of behaviour or lack of accident, which is it jars with what we've said I think we've talked about before about how new evidence can't be introduced into a case, whereas this one's saying, actually, yeah, it can.
Right.
There's a name for it, but I can't remember what it is.
I have no idea.
Someone tell me, please. This meant details from Wuornos' other 6 murder cases could legally be presented to the jury, painting a broader and more damning picture of her actions and mindset. Initially, Wuornos insisted that each of the 7 killings had been committed in self-defence, but investigators and prosecutors quickly noted troubling inconsistencies in her accounts. Her story changed multiple times, both in formal statements and in conversations with those close to her, including Tyria Moore.
Right, okay.
In her first confession to police, Wuornos claimed that Richard Mallory had picked her up while she was hitchhiking and that they had driven to a remote wooded area for sex. She said that an argument broke out and she feared Mallory intended to rob and rape her. Reaching into a bag where she kept a handgun, she claimed Mallory tried to grab it, leading to a brief struggle. Wuornos said she ultimately gained control of the weapon, pointed it at Mallory and shouted, so this is a quote, "You son of a bitch, I knew you were going to rape me," to which Mallory allegedly replied, no, I wasn't. She then shot him while he was still seated behind the wheel. According to her confession, Mallory exited the car and tried to shut the door behind him. Wuornos said she circled around the front of the vehicle and fired again, hitting him and causing him to collapse. While Mallory lay on the ground, she fired 2 more rounds, searched his pockets for valuables, partially concealed his body beneath a piece of carpet and drove off in his car. Wuornos later admitted to police that she had given Tyria Moore conflicting explanations about what had happened. In one version, she told Moore that she had stumbled across a dead body hidden under a rug in the woods. In another, she openly confessed to killing Mallory herself. Something skewed because I think someone in a more stable state of mind would see just how can it be one and then the other?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
You stumbled across a dead body or you shot him.
Yeah.
That is a massive difference.
Yeah, definitely.
These contradictions, paired with the gruesome details of her confession, proved devastating to her self-defence claim and gave the prosecution powerful leverage in court. In her initial videotape confession, Aileen Wuornos made no claim that Richard Mallory had raped her. In fact, what stood out most wasn't a desperate effort to save herself, but rather a determined attempt to protect Tyria. By that point, Moore had cooperated with law enforcement, agreeing to help elicit a confession from Wuornos in exchange for immunity. So she spoke to Aileen by phone, telling her that unless she came clean, Moore herself might be prosecuted as an accomplice. Obviously, the pressure worked, and then during the interrogation, Wuornos focused less on building a defence and more on shielding Tyria from blame. Observers noted that Wuornos appeared composed and even conversational throughout the questioning. She was unemotional, joking at times, and even told her court-appointed public defender to stop talking, clearly taking control of the situation. She made it clear she wasn't seeking sympathy. "I took a life," she said bluntly. "I am willing to give up my life because I killed people. I deserve to die."
Wow.
The defence team argued that Aileen Wuornos, that her videotape confession should be inadmissible in court, claiming it was obtained under coercive conditions that violated her constitutional right to due process. Although Wuornos had been properly advised of her Miranda rights and was assigned a public defender who explicitly cautioned her not to make detailed statements, the defence contended that law enforcement's manipulation of her emotional connection to Tyria Moore so destabilised her mental state that she was unable to fully comprehend her legal rights or the consequences of disregarding her attorney's advice.
Wow. There's just so much going on with this.
You should watch the documentaries.
Yeah.
Despite these objections, the trial court rejected the motion to suppress the confession. The judge ruled that Wuornos had spoken voluntarily and that the use of Moore in securing her statements did not rise to the level of unconstitutional coercion. Making matters worse for the defence, the videotape confession had already been leaked to the media, further shaping a public narrative of Wuornos as cold-blooded and remorseless before the trial even began. In subsequent interviews with the police, Wuornos elaborated on her self-defence claims, offering a harrowing account of her final hours with Richard Mallory. According to her, she had agreed to perform a sex act for money, and the two drove to a remote location where they drank, smoked marijuana, and talked for several hours. Wuornos described herself as drunk royal by the time things turned violent. She said that when she disrobed and asked Mallory to do the same, he refused, saying he only wanted to unzip his pants and didn't have the money to pay her. As she moved to retrieve her clothing, Wuornos claimed Mallory suddenly attacked, wrapping a cord around her neck, tying her hands to the steering wheel and threatening to kill her, allegedly saying, "Just like the other sluts I've done."
Oh.
I'm going to leave it there for the next instalment.
I knew it was a complicated story, but there's so much more than I realised. It's like the kind of thing that if you made it up, people would be like, "Oh, that's too far-fetched."
Yeah. Every sort of huge murder case does get sensationalised some way or another.
Yeah.
But it's just the involvement of just all the different people. You got her adopted mother, who is a born-again Christian, legal representative,
who's also a singer, apparently.
And you've got law enforcement. You've got her ex-lover.
Yep.
And they've all just they're bleeding her dry, essentially.
Yeah, it's awful. What platform is the documentary?
One is Prime, one is Channel 4.
Oh, okay.
Or they're both on Channel 4 as well.
Yeah,
so
watch them then.
Yeah, it's massive. This whole thing. A lot of it I didn't know. Like I didn't know about the whole trying to sell everything like to movie producers and whatnot.
Yeah, I didn't know any of that.
Before even like the trial is getting started and whatnot. So the next episode, I will continue with the with some of the statements she made about Mallory in the trial.
Okay.
So it will just be basically a straight continuation from, because it's very difficult to find a place where you can just stop.
Yeah, of course.
It all kind of just rolls into one. So, yeah,
wow.
That is the beginning of Aileen Wuornos, the Damsel of Death, and America's first known female serial killer.
It's so interesting. Thank you, Ali. All right, well, thank you very much, Mark, at Park Lane Studios, for all the visuals, all the lighting, all the sound, basically the whole production. He does everything. He even does socials now. Without him, we couldn't do any of this. And you can find us and where to listen to us and watch and talk to us and find our merch on linktree/Cards and the Macabre. When you watch and or listen to us, please make sure you like, subscribe, download, share, comment, set the reminders and things.
Yep. To know when a new episode is out.
That's it.
Yep.
I think that's it.
I think that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Ali. I can't wait to hear the rest of it.
You are welcome.
It's bonkers. It is bonkers. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, until next time,
Stay spooky, bitches.